Good evening, dear learners. Today we are going to continue with the literary criticism, and we have come to the Romantic Age. And today we shall see different writers writing about their perspectives on different literary criticism that we are going to see today. Okay, first we'll see what is Romanticism. Okay, what is the idea of Romanticism, and then we'll go over to different writers like Wordsworth, Coleridge, and Shelley. They have their different criticisms, they have their different takes on literature. So that we are going to see. Now, first, let me just give you a brief introduction of Romanticism. What is Romanticism? When did it emerge? And what are the special features of Romanticism? Okay, so we know that this Romantic age started from late 18th century and it continued till early 19th century. All right, and this kind of romantic, we call it romantic revival, we call it romantic movement also. It exactly, if you see, it started in Britain, Germany, and Britain. Okay, and actually, what is this? What do you mean by romanticism? Is that actually during this period, when the stress was mainly on freedom of individual self-expression. Okay, self-expression of individual became very important during this period, during this era of romanticism. Okay, now, many have joined today. So, hello everyone once again. Students, those who joined just now, let me tell you that we have started with romantic criticisms. Different kinds of criticisms are there. So, as we have just started, I'm just explaining to you what is romanticism or romantic movement, or we also call it romantic revival. So, as I was telling you, the special feature of this period is that. Uh, People wanted more freedom of individual self-expression. Okay, so before this period, just before this period was Augustan period, and this period was supposed to be looked at with a very mechanical and artificial perspective. Okay, but here if you see in the romantic revival, you see a lot of originality and spontaneity is taken care of. Okay, during Augustan period, there were writers like Dryden, Pope, Johnson. Okay, they were very important during those phase, and those who, they were also known as neoclassical. Those who liked to imitate from the classical period, but now during romantic revival, we saw a complete sweep. We saw a complete movement of perspectives. Okay, from imitating and mechanically writing about old classical times, now the writers focused more towards emotion and inspirations they said they got from nature. Okay, prior to this they said that they got inspiration from classical age, but now these poets, these writers, poets specifically, poets were very famous during this phase. They said that their inspiration was mainly nature. Okay, and as they are part of the nature, so the first and intrinsic inspiration for them is nature. So they were, these romantic writers had complete free spirit, they were very creative. Okay, and they believed in imaginative truth. All right, so if you see the criticism that is made during this phase, we call it romantic criticism. Okay, and here you see there are different writers who are making their critical approaches with they have taken different historical background that we shall be discussing today, and they had their own broad ideas about certain aspect about what they thought uh, is special in nature, and taking that particular perspective they have written their criticisms. Okay, So, first of all, they said that if they are talking about romantic criticism, they all try to chalk out some definition, some proper term of the word romanticism. Okay, so different literary critics, they had different angles of their definitions, and there were a lot of controversy also during those times. In order to exactly define romanticism. Okay, so at that time there were many critics, those who believed that this kind of literary theorizing and imaginative literature, they said that there was not particular romanticism, but there were several romanticisms. Are you getting what I'm saying? There are many critics at that time who said that when they talk about literary theorizing and imaginative literature, they said that no, there is no exact romanticism, but there are many romanticisms, there are many aspects, there are many phases, there are many, you can say, pages of romanticism. Okay, so many romantic critics, they took this point and they had their own criticism, they had their own argument. Okay, and they had their own perspective. But overall, if you see, overall, what aspect all these romantic critics agreed to was that they all believed that romanticism was the greatest emphasis on individuality. Okay, and they talked about the different broad dimensions of human experiences. Okay, an individual and his experiences surrounding an individual was the most important aspect of romanticism. Okay, so believe that those romantics overall, they believe that one individual is completely different from other individual. Okay, so that is why they said that if one individual is different, wholly different from the other individual, so there cannot be one romanticism, there can be many romanticisms. Okay, so basing on this fact, we are going to discuss some of the common traits of romanticism. Okay, but please remember, when we are going ahead, our basic aspect will be that romantics, they viewed man as individual and autonomous entity. Okay, and although an individual is an autonomous entity, so there are many forms of romanticisms. Okay, and every person reacts differently to his or her reacts differently to his or her external reality. Okay. Now there's a very famous critic here, romantic critic called Rene Wellek. Okay, Renewellek. Rene Wellek. Okay, he is one of those persons who was able to give an exact identifying common features of romanticism. Okay, and which many romantics accepted also his view of uh, romanticism. So according to Rene Wellek, particular, he said romantics had a particular. Just hold on. I'm so sorry I got disconnected. There was some problem with the connectivity. Yeah, let me continue with you where I left. So I was talking about Rene Welleck's point of view of romanticism, and we see that Rene Welleck's point of view is mostly accepted by many writers and many critics also. He talked about some common features. Okay, so what he's saying, romantic features of romanticism, common features of romanticism. So he says that mainly overall, the aspect of romanticism is based on imagination. Okay, if you talk about some common traits, then he said that all these romanticism had a flavor, a kind of flavor, where every writer's, every critic's attitude to nature had a particular style. Okay, attitude to nature had a different understanding. Okay, everyone was very sensitive. All the romantics were very sensitive towards nature, and they had a particular style of writing. Please mark this. This is important. Also, when you are, writing novels or poetry, especially on romantic age, please remember these are the some common traits of all the romantic writers, and this has been chalked down by Rene Vellec. Rene Vellec says that all romanticism has a particular attitude towards nature, and all these romantics they had a particular style of writing. Okay, so here he Vellec says that nature, individual, okay, and writing style was different. You should mark one thing, that he did not talk about the political dimension. When we are reading a text or when we are seeing an age, okay, we are suppose seeing the Victorian age, we are seeing Elizabethan age, we are seeing the whole political backdrop. Okay, whereas here Welleck doesn't say anything about the political dimension of romanticism. So if you see the from the political angle of romanticism, then this whole idea of romantics came from of the individual worth. Okay, that the romantic poets and critics uh, talked about from time to time. They talked about the individual worth. Okay, they talked about individual worth, all the poets, and these poets, actually romantic poets particularly, they talked about the worth of common people. Okay, in their writings, that even common people matter according to them. Okay, and these romantics, they talked about the universal brotherhood, which means that if you see early writings, till yesterday when I was discussing you those literary criticisms of of Plato or Aristotle. We may went over to even Elizabethan writers also. There we had discussed that these dramas, particularly as a form of genre, and even poetry, they were meant for. They were made specially keeping in view of the upper class needs. Okay, no doubt that lower class people also watched drama, but upper class people were mainly accessible to poetries because they were the educated classes. Okay, and drama was specially meant for upper class. If you see Shakespeare's writing only about kings and high class people, about dukes and duchess and earls. Okay, so he's talking about Ben Jonson even does the same thing. So there's nothing about common people. Okay, so that is why we say this is a revival. This is a romantic revival where many poets they are taking into consideration the importance of even common people. Okay, a common human being which was never spoken about, and these are the people who talk about universal brotherhood. Okay, so uh, here you can see that in romanticism, if you talk about romantic writings overall, then you will see that imagination plays a very pertinent role. Okay, and they are talking about these writers, they talk about certain mysterious creative faculty which plays a role in creating in not only creating but in accepting this kind of simple aspect of literature. There is a lot of simplicity in literature. If you read romantic poems, you will see that how simple they are. Okay, even a less educated person can also understand. Okay, so we people, we students of English literature, we can understand all the types of poetry. Our reception faculty is a little bit higher than other people. But if you see romantic poems, you will find that even a common person can understand what the poem is about. So they believed in simplicity, the romantics, which even a simple person, a common person, a layman who is not a poet, who is not from the area of literature, can also read and understand and enjoy poems. Okay, so that is a very special feature of a romantic romantic writing. Okay. Now moving on, um, we will discuss a bit of romantic epistemology, and then we'll go over to the different criticism written by different writers. Okay. Now you can see that romantic, or they call it expressive theory also, because their writing was very expressive. Okay, it was a great simple theory of art. Okay, and it was radically different from other parts, other other periods and their writings. Okay, like last class we were discussing so much about mimetic aspect of literature. Okay, so these were not totally rejected by the romantics. They had one underlying aspect of mimetic aspect, mimetic angle of literary production. They believed in that. They also believed in imitative rationalist aesthetics. Romantics believe that that literature has imitative and rationalistic aesthetic. Imitation is there, but they have certain rational quality also in their writing. They're imitating from nature. What we see in nature, what we see around us, we are writing, no doubt, but we are reproducing it very rationally. This was the basic notion of romantic epistemology. Okay, and you must remember the different components of romantic epistemology. The first is the active projective view of human self or mind. Okay, I think I've already explained that individuality and human mind. Okay, individual human mind was taken into consideration. Each human mind was taken as a very important aspect of existence by them. Okay. Second romantic epistemology is they did not have complete trust on reason. Okay, they did not believe on reason. Like we had the age of reason, where where only what do you say, very logical things were put into discussion, but they did not completely have this aspect of reason, because sometimes they believe that the aspects of nature, they exist without any reason. Okay, and the third is, as I have already discussed, they had a lot of belief on individualism. Okay, now according to this romantic epistemology, they believe that human mind has got a very mimetic view. Mimetic means whatever we see, we imitate. You can see that a lot we have discussed for the past few days about this mimetic aspects. So I think by now you understand what is this mimetic aspect. So according to these romantic writers, romantic artists, they said that human mind is very has got a very mimetic aspect. Okay, and a human mind is a passive recipient of external expressions. Okay, maybe not actively but passively, which may mean that may not be consciously but subconsciously, we are we are grasping, we are getting within us all the external impressions. That is quite obvious. Whatever external things are there happening around us, we we grasp it, we receive them. Okay, maybe consciously or subconsciously. And sometimes we just see and we observe whatever is happening near us. Okay. So they believe that human mind is very very soft. Whatever it sees, it just grasps. So this view of human mind, this particular perspective of human mind, it continued to be there in the thoughts of the romantics. Okay. And from time to time during this whole romantic phase, they believed in this human mind and these aspects of human mind. And they experimented these aspects of human mind, this soft attitude of human mind towards nature. These romantics, they experimented it from time to time, and they wrote the piece of literature. Okay. Now, last class also we were discussing a very important aspect of psychology, that very often we have borrowed in education also. Okay. And what is that? Locke had said that human mind is empty. Okay. It is when you are born, it is like an empty slate. Those who have read education, they might be able to connect this, that it is believed that a human mind is like an empty slate, and with your whatever is written is your experiences. But initially you are born with an empty slate. Okay. And different impressions are what makes up to the different writings in that slate. So that term is known as tabula rasa. Okay. Tabula rasa. And this was a groundbreaking idea, discovery on human mind, which was explored further by different in literature. If you see, by different critics, by different writers also, this kind of innocence of a human mind is also expressed in different aspects of romantic writers. Okay, romantic writers, romantic poets particularly, they believed in this innocent feature of human mind, that it is completely empty. Mind is empty when a person is born, when a person is inexperienced. Slowly slowly this mind gets used. Okay. Things are stored in our mind in the form of memory as we go on with our life. The experiences gets added up in our life. This is also one of the major beliefs of the romantics. Okay. Now, we'll be moving into some romantic theory, because if I'm going to explain this more, I'll be repeating the same things over and over again. We are moving to these different theories of the romantic period. Okay. So here, when we are discussing about these theories, you must remember that the whole emphasis of these different theories is mostly focused on the inner dimension of the individual art. Okay. Mainly all these criticisms are emphasizing on the inner dimension of the individual artist. Okay, inner dimension. We're looking inwards toward every individual artist. Okay. And if you come to the conclusion of these criticisms, then you will find that these critics, they are rejecting that mimetic conclusion. Okay. They do not conclude that art is complete imagination, or art is the best interpretation. Okay. Like earlier writers, they used to say art is the best interpretation. Okay. And earlier people used to say, uh, only witty people can write poetry, and only agreeable pictures are shown in art. So these people, they are not concluding in that way. Okay. They say that art can be produced, accepted, absorbed by common people also. Okay. So there might not be any wit present in art. Okay. In poetry particularly. So what do they say? These critics, they point out the romantic feature of the poets. Some common features, they say that poetry is the expression of the inner self. Okay. And It is the reflection of the inner cell. Sorry, it is the expression of the inner cell. After that expression of the inner cell, whatever is reflected, that is external in nature. Okay, so they modify with the imagination. Okay, they modify their experiences with the imagination, and whatever they take in, that they reflect through their poetry. See, I'm telling you in very easy terms. uh, for romantics, a poet is an innocent person. Okay, he sees the outer facets of nature. Okay, and he absorbs whatever he sees in nature. He takes it inwardly, whatever is his experience regarding nature, whatever beauty he sees in nature, he takes in. He uses his poetic forms, okay, with the help of his inner individuality, and he writes his poems. Are you able to understand, or should I repeat for you, learners? Please let me know. Are you able to understand? Yeah, thank you so much for understanding. I can see few thumbs up flying around in my screen. So I think you have understood. See, it is very simple, nothing complicated. These romantic writers, what these critics are pointing out is some special features of the romantic writers. And I think we all know that romantic period was mainly famous for romantic poets. Got it? They were specially romantic poets. And what were the special features of the romantic poet? That these people, they observed whatever was there around them. Okay, so these people were nature lovers, so mainly they used to live in amid nature. So they saw all the aspects of natural things. When they saw these natural things, they absorbed all the beauty, okay, in their intellect, in their minds. And looking inwardly, looking inwardly means looking uh, towards the individual self, like when you see yourself in the mirror. So for writing for them was when they looked inward, when they tried to seek for their inner ideas, okay, regarding what they are seeing outside. So with the use of their poetic talent, poetic expressions, they used to write, okay, poems. They wrote about the poem with the help of the inner selves. Now, I think I'm clear about this romantic aspect, because this is important. Whenever you read these criticisms, you will be finding this, especially in Wordsworth's lyrical ballads. He's discussing a lot about this simplicity of literary productions, which is away from any complexity, difficulty, wit, okay, confusions. There is nothing of that sort. It is simple, written by simple people, written for the simple people. Okay, so here he's saying that here, sorry, where I was. Um, there's some noise in the group. If your any of your phone or your gadget is unmute, please put it under mute. There'll be disturbances and echoes. Now this is what they believed, and then they emphasize more on expression. How expression could there be? So dear learners, let me know, have you read any romantic poem? Anyone can answer me if you have read any romantic poem. Simple. Can you name few which you have read? Any of the learners here? Let us be little interactive, because I go on jabbering. I can't know if you are learning or not. Anyone, let me know. Any romantic poem that you have read? Anyone? Nothing. You have not read anything. Anyone? Any romantic poem that you remember? Maybe from your school days. No. Okay. So there was
Yes, ma'am.
Wordsworth. Which one? Tell me. Rajveer.
Ma'am,
Rajveer is responding. Good. Tell me,
ma'am,
Rajveer.
ma'am, the ancient Madinah, Kubla Khan,
Wow.
Daffodil,
So nice.
and I think Tintin Abbey,
Yes. Nice.
the Rune Cottage,
Very nice. Have
and
you read Daffodils?
yes, ma'am. I think
We had.
when I was in school, I think
Yes, that was in school and I think higher secondary also. Daffodils, then Solitary Reaper.
yes, ma'am.
Then you have already named Kubla Khan. Then O2 Sky, no, not O2, just the Skylark by Shelley. Okay, so if you have read, it is very nice that you have read Rajveer, so that you'll be able to connect whatever you have read with this criticism. Okay, so if you see all these poems, you will see that there's an emphasis on expression. They're so expressive. Okay, which means that they have let their inner being come out. Okay, whatever they are inwardly, they have allowed their inner self to come out. Okay, and although there might be different types of definitions, but these are the certain very common traits of each and every individual romantic poet. Okay, so what many different definitions are there, like Wordsworth is saying poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. Coleridge, in his of poesy of art, okay, he tells that all fine arts are a kind of revelation of the inner world of a man. Okay, whatever art you're producing, it is the revelation of your inner world. There's an inner world within you, and when you let it out through art, that becomes poetry. Okay, Shelley also talks about poetry that we'll be reading. He says that it is poetry is the expression of imagination. Okay, Lord Byron says that poetry is the lava of imagination whose eruption prevents earthquake. ओके, लावा से अर्थक्वेक होता है, बट पोइट्री ऐसा लावा है जिससे अर्थक्वेक इज प्रिवेंटेड. ओके, so very much central to this all this romantic theory of art is the group of ideas, okay, which are in practice. They practice it for the convenience. Okay, that is all practically used by these romantic writers, and these romantic expressions are imagination, with the help of imagination, inspiration, okay, emotion. So all of these are very finely blended, and a very fine fabric of romantic literature comes out. They use a lot of imagination in their writing. Now we'll move over to literary criticisms. We'll go to Wordsworth first. Lyrical ballads. Preface to lyrical ballads. Okay, now you are going to first approach this particular literary criticism by William Wordsworth. Okay, so actually this book, Lyrical Ballad, it is a volume of poems, and it was initially published anonymously. Wordsworth and Coleridge, they published it, but they did not give any name. It was anonymously published in 1798. Okay, so actually, Wordsworth and Coleridge, they were two friends. Okay, they were not only great poets, but personally they were good friends, and they had met in 1795. Okay, see, they met in 1795 and they released a book in 1798, in 3 years. Okay, and when they met in 1795, they felt that they have a kind of, intellectual sameness. Okay, they were similar in terms of their intellectual abilities. So, and they believe also when they talked to each other, they found that both of them had some certain similar beliefs also. Okay, and both of them started believing that piece of art, according to them, has to be simple. Okay, there should not be so much of sophistication, so that only one class of people can enjoy, others cannot. So they believe that now it is time for literature to come down to the simple level, written in language of the lower class or of the middle class. Okay, and also they should express, literature should express the fundamentals of human nature. So both of them agreed upon these similar aspects. All right. So they published the first volume of their poetry collection called Lyrical Ballads in 1798. Okay. And in that book, when you open a book, you must have seen there is sometimes a foreword, introduction. Okay, then the whole literature is written. So through foreword and introduction, and sometimes a prologue and epilogues are also there. These are actually giving us certain more details about the book. So in this lyrical ballads, they have written a very short foreword. So in this short foreword, Wordsworth had very briefly given the main points of his argument. So in this book, the foreword is the literary criticism of the book. Okay. In the first edition, he had given a very small foreword, which gives his basic ideas about poetry. That it should be simple, it should be very imaginative, creative, but written in such words that even the lower and middle class people can understand. Okay, it, this was published in 1798. Now Wordsworth was still not satisfied. He let out another second edition in 1800, and in this 1800 volume, many new poems were added, and here you will see a longer and a very detailed preface is written in the second volume. Okay, and actually, again it was republished in 1802 after 2 years. Again a thorough revision was made, particularly by Wordsworth. Okay, in and that preface was very nicely revised, expanded further, and it was published in 1802. So you can see that first publication was 1798. Short forward was written by Wordsworth. Okay, with a little bit of critical insight. Second volume again got republished in 1800, where a long preface was written by Wordsworth. Again, for the third time, it was reissued in 1802, where Shakespeare had revised and sorry, not Shakespeare, but Wordsworth. He had expanded in 1802, and he gave many significant additional information. He gave many important definition of the poet as a universal person. Okay, and also he gave the value of poetry. So, if you read the preface to Lyrical Ballad of 1802, you will see that it is a very revolutionary work. Okay, a new ideas he's trying to give, and he gives a very apt critical statement. Uh, and actually, he was also Wordsworth also a poet. He was uh, deeply, he had that sense of mission to initiate free poetry. Okay, so he also was very interested, very passionate about introducing free poetry. Okay, and according to him, this poetry must be taken off from the hands of only high class people and should be handed over to middle class and even lower class also. So that is why all sorts of artificiality should have to be removed. It should be very real. It should be actually lived experience. Okay, it should be very authentic expression of sincere feelings and mode of experience according to Wordsworth. Okay, and he doesn't say that no, that past tradition should have to be broken. No, he did not say that. Okay, but he said that certain, it's time to bring certain newness also in the poetry. Okay, in order to make a tradition, and he said that they also will be contributing in making a certain tradition for the poets. He's also setting some stage for future poets. Okay, so Wordsworth is the one who inaugurated the new era in poetry. He started one new era in poetry, okay, through his romantic ideas. Now, by romantic idea here means this particular ideas that I was discussing: individuality, fascination, and inspiration from nature, simplicity. These are called the romantic ideas. So now we shall see what Wordsworth has to say about poetry. Okay, and what according to him is the exact definition of a poet. Okay, then we shall discuss what is the value of poetry and what should be the style then. If we are saying that no, that we are going to depart from that earlier style, we are going to establish our own style. What will be this style we will be discussing now? What does he say about poetry? As I told you, Wordsworth says that all good poetry, all good, all excellent poetry has to be the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. So it should be like, feelings are overflowing. Okay, feelings are so much filled in the heart that it is overflowing in the pen, in the paper through pen. Okay, but according to him, not only this, but he talks about many different aspects of poetry. He says that one has to attach great value to the poetry. Okay, it should be of high value, and such kind of production must be made during this era, which was not, thought of any time before this. So our romantic poetry has to be a very historical in its aspect, according to Wordsworth. Okay, and uh, he says that poetry should come out of long thoughts, long and deep thoughts. Okay, so uh, when the poetry comes from long and deep thoughts, it is modified. Whatever you think, you just polish it, modify it, sharpen your thoughts, give direction to your thoughts. Okay, properly represent your feelings, and then you write the poetry as if there's a, you have discovered a really important man within yourself. Okay, you have to bring a very new person from within yourself. The thought has to be so deep. Okay, so our feelings, it says that feelings have to be very strong, and your feelings should be connected with all important subjects. Okay, and your writing should be highly sensible. Okay, it should be highly original. It should be, it should look like the habit of mind. Such kind of thinking, as if it is the habit of your mind that you have to show. It should not at all be mechanical in its impulse. Okay, it may describe objects, it might be very sentimental in nature. Okay, it might have some connection with each other. Mutual connections also cannot be there. Okay, and a kind of understanding you have to establish if you are writing about somebody else. Okay, and overall, Wordsworth says that it should be of a very healthful, okay, healthful state it must have, and it must enlighten the reader. It must have some affection, some affectionate aspect should be there, and also the reader will be enlightened after reading that. Okay, so these are the general aspects according to him should be there in a romantic poetry. So according to him, poetry now becomes full of life when so much of thought is put in, when so much of understanding is put in, okay, about somebody or something, then you will see that these poetries are not lifeless. They're full of life. The art is full of life. Okay, and you will not only see only their skill in writing, the poet's skill in writing, but also you will see how what kind of imitation, because they are not completely rejecting the mimetic capability of literature. So similarly, Wordsworth is saying that it can be imitative, but it should have some rational aesthetics, some sensible, okay, with commonsensical aesthetics should be there. So these were the special feature of 18th century poets. Okay, so according to Wordsworth, poetry is the reflection of the wisdom of the heart and the grandeur of imagination. So, in your heart, you should supplement your thoughts with your imagination and write poetry. And if such kind of poetry is written, then according to him, it would touch the deepest chords of the human heart. Okay, and it will have a humanizing and sensitizing effect. According to Wordsworth, if all these features are there, then the reader's, you know, chords of his heart will be moved, will be touched, okay, and the reader will have a humanizing and sensitizing effect. So again and again he's talking about spontaneity. There should be very spontaneous. The movement of the poetic line should be very smooth, okay, where man and nature should have a, should have deep respect. And Wordsworth always had the tendency to talk about from individual point of view to the general point of view. Okay, so from individual to general, so from myself to the whole aspect of nature. He always emphasized on this aspect, and he always discussed about modifying, polishing this spontaneity and feeling. He repeatedly talks about spontaneity and feeling, okay, in order to maintain a universal point of view. Okay, he talks about spontaneity, he talks about feeling, he talks about the tendencies of human feelings, which should be universal. Okay, and Wordsworth is trying to identify three main characteristics in a poet. Okay, first he says that poet has to be extremely sensitive. Okay, he must be very sensible. He must have enthusiasm. He must be tender enough to comprehend different souls. Okay, and that poet should come from common mankind, should be a common part of the mankind. This is the first characteristic of of a poet, that he should be extremely sensitive, extremely sensible, and extremely enthusiastic. Okay, and a great poet should have the ability to understand man's feelings. Okay, he should have the ability to give these feelings some new forms. Okay, he should have the ability uh, to reproduce those feelings into pure and permanent poems. Okay, so according to Wordsworth, every great poet is a teacher. So he says that he says that thirdly, the poet is blessed with some extraordinarily strong imagination. Okay, which is not there in common man. Every common man cannot write poetry, but the one who is a poet, he should possess some extraordinary strong power of imagination. Okay, so that he is affected by the things which is not there, which is absent. Okay, means he could see presence in certain absent things. Okay, means what he could see, other common people won't be able to see. That kind of sharp vision the poet should have. Okay, so Wordsworth himself, if you read his poems, you will see that he also had a very strong power of imagination. Okay, so that he was able to, beautify every common aspect of life. So Wordsworth, that is why Wordsworth sees poet as a man who is possessed with more than usual sensibility, organic sensibility. Poet has more sensibility than others because Wordsworth himself had that. Okay, he possessed that kind of quality where he he was able to make simple things special. He had that capability. If you see daffodils, if you see solitary reaper, Wordsworth, so you will see that they are simple aspects of nature, but he makes it so special, he makes it so eternal. Okay, so according to Wordsworth, some good poets need to have two qualities, of thought and of feeling. Okay, so thought one feeling will not work without the other. Thought and feeling are interlinked. Okay, so the poet is different from other men, not in the kind but in the degree of qualities. Okay, poet is just like any other man, but what special qualities he has, what special sensibility he has, should be completely different from other people. Now, if you see preface to lyrical ballad as a piece of criticism, it puts forward Wordsworth's theory of poetic diction. It talks about diction also. Diction means style, the rhetorics, and how you use the words in order to make your poetry powerful, make your thinking powerful. Okay, so he says that it talks about diction. He had certain ideas on poetic diction, and he says that although it is controversial, many more criticisms are being made on his idea of diction. But according to Wordsworth, uh, Wordsworth actually casually gives a remark on his practical application of the theory. Okay. Uh, so the main idea of his theory, of Wordsworth's theory, is that poetic style, according to Wordsworth, is organic. Okay, it is very organic. It is very, what should I say? Very natural, very simple. Okay, there should not be digression. There should not be a high, what do you say? High languages jargon should not be there, which won't be understood by common people. So there should be also simplicity in the stylistic devices. Stylistics should be there. He doesn't say that good figures of speech should be empty. No, they should be there because that adds to the poetry. But that should be understandable. That should be relatable according to him. Okay, and that is very rational thing that he's saying. That which we can understand. Okay, so, according to him, these devices or figures of speech that is being used by the poet, okay, must be quite natural, quite spontaneous, quite understandable, quite relatable. It must be of these qualities. So he says that early poets, they used to write very naturally. They used to have very powerful feeling. Okay, they had good figurative languages, but slowly, when the successors of these poets came, and especially when neoclassical age came, actually Wordsworth was very cynical about this neoclassical age. Uh, so the style was taken away by the neoclassics, and it was completely imitation to the limits of artificiality. Okay, the neoclassical age was followed by romantic age. So Wordsworth said that no, that was completely artificial. Okay, imitation is there. We cannot avoid imitation. When you see the theories of Plato, especially Aristotle, okay, imitation is there, but neoclassics, they imitated very artificially. Okay, so that should be stopped, and some natural flow should be introduced in the poetry and poetic diction, according to Wordsworth. So, Wordsworth completely rejected what was artificial. Okay, he completely rejected which was very stagnantly, which had very stagnant poetic diction. Okay, he said that those things should not be used, which looked very superfluous. Okay, which looked very shallow. Those things should be avoided, according to Wordsworth. Then comes Coleridge. The next critic comes Coleridge. He has written his famous work, Biographia Literaria. Okay, uh, this biographical literature, we should discuss this tomorrow. We'll be discussing this tomorrow. But until your teacher joins, I suppose he has not joined yet. So until he joins, I'll discuss more on this Shakespearean, sorry, Wordsworthian aspects, and what other critics have to say about what Wordsworth feels. That we shall discuss. Now, one of the very significant aspect of Wordsworth's this particular literary criticism is that uh, which one of preface to lyrical ballad. It is actually very healthy practice he has done. He has shown his concern actually here towards the strengthening and promoting human culture. Okay, because here he gives some sympathy to every mankind. Okay, here he gives no classification. Okay, high class, low class, upper class. This must be centered around these aspects. No, he talks about very common human culture. Okay, so here you can see that it is a very good revival in terms of humanity, in kinds of our our what do you say, our existence, coexistence with nature. Okay, so culture here, if you talk about culture actually means that the common relatable features of mind and spirit. Okay, and which may be intellectual, which may be spiritual. However, these romantics are very cynical, they're very negative about material life. They focus more on intellectual and spiritual life. Okay, so that is what is the culture here according to the beliefs of uh, Wordsworth. Let me see what else is still left for me, because I have covered everything for you today. Now, only briefly, I'll say what other critics and writers are saying about Wordsworth's theory of diction. Uh, Here, there's important criticism which we'll be doing tomorrow. Coleridge's biography and literature will be discussing tomorrow. So there, he gives a little bit of judgment, not negative, but a criticism of Wordsworth's poetry. Okay, so according to Coleridge, Wordsworth was the greatest poet of the age. So he pays a tribute to Wordsworth. Okay, and so he says that uh, Wordsworth is just one of the uh, fountainheads of the romantic age. Okay, so he says that Coleridge says that Wordsworth is considered as the third greatest poet of English, and he declared that their age will be known by Wordsworth. Okay, Coleridge said that their age will be known through Wordsworth. Okay, so as I told you, they were good friends, and there's a letter written by Coleridge to Wordsworth. Okay, and in that letter, he is saying that is saying to Wordsworth that that Wordsworth was the only man to him at all time and in all modes of excellence. I feel myself inferior. So Coleridge is saying that you are the only person, you are the only man before whom I feel myself inferior. Okay. Then also he writes, I feel myself a little man by his side. Okay, you are such huge Wordsworth. You are so talented. You are such huge. You are so intelligent that before you, I find myself small. Okay, so he gives huge tribute to Wordsworth, saying, talking about his greatness before every other romantic writer. Okay, and Wordsworth's greatness mainly lies in the union of deep feeling with his profound thought. Wordsworth has got a fine balance of, truth in observation, and he had a great imaginative faculty in modifying simple objects into special things. Okay, that's what I have already discussed. So, according to Coleridge, Wordsworth was fully justified in his criticism. And when he talks about, according to Coleridge, Wordsworth, he agrees what Wordsworth says. He says that uh, it is completely true what Wordsworth says about artificiality, about unnaturalness of poetic diction. And he also believes that the creative writer's experience should be such that the language of his poetry should be the language of natural conversation of men under the influence of natural feelings. So he says that the language should be such that will expose the language of natural conversation of men under the influence of natural feelings. Okay. Okay, so I think it's more than my given time that I have taken with you. I'll stop now. And dear learners, please wait for your next teacher to join while I take your leave.
Ma'am, can I please ask you a question?
Yes, please.
Ma'am, just wanted to ask you if we
Yes.
get a question related to romantic criticism or related to Wordsworth and Coleridge, generally we are expected to fill around 4 pages.
Okay.
So my only question is that could you please guide us on what all we can add in that kind of a situation to
Yes.
ensure that we are
Please,
filling up,
please.
for example,
Yes.
the discussion discuss the position of imagination and emotions as
Hmm.
opposed to rationality in romantic poetry.
This
So if
is
you
what I've been telling you for the past 1 hour,
Yes,
Preeti.
ma'am. So when we are speaking or when we are kind of wording these things in loudly, then
Hmm.
it kind of it takes up time. But when we actually sit down to write,
Hmm.
are there any examples or anything that we can add to make our answer substantial enough
Yes, yes,
for
yes,
us to get good scores?
yes, yes. You can give a direct comparison with neoclassical age. That is what I've been saying. That these writers, romantic writers, are very spontaneous. They're very natural. They're very creative. They're very imaginative. But that was not happening during neoclassical age when Dryden, Pope, okay, and Johnson, they used to write. What they believed is that neoclassical was the revival of classical age. So most of the writer, no, they just imitated. As I told you, this mimesis is there. Mimetic quality is not rejected completely by romantics. You can be inspired. Okay, and also you can have some influence of classical age because that was a great age. You cannot, detach yourself from your past history. Okay, but what romantics said that you should have some originality in the name of again, influence. You are just giving imitation imitative work. Okay, so you can give examples, no problem about that. You can give examples of neoclassical age. Okay, and you can say how romantics are completely different, completely new, completely creative, completely fresh in their perspectives, and this brought a new sweep to the history of English literature. Are you getting my point, Preeti?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so your next teacher has joined. So while he starts taking your class, I'll take your leave. Go. Goodbye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, good evening, everyone.